Today on Yeti at Large, an interesting story about two staff sergeants in Patton's Third Army, situational awareness in public places, but first, a serious message about supporting the artist that's in the thumbnail.
Hi, and welcome to Yeti at Large. This is a channel focused on making the most out of what you have, no matter where you're at. Thanks for tuning in and helping out.
Thank you for tuning in to Yeti at Large today. Please like, subscribe, share this channel with a friend. Most importantly though, consider supporting the artist that's in the thumbnail. There's more information about supporting that artist and these artists at the end of the video if that's why you're here. Skip right to the end and get that information. There's also info in the description. Today's video is about situational awareness and a very interesting story that came out of it. Anytime I go into a crowded store, my situational awareness level goes up significantly. Many of you know that in public safety I did a lot of training and teaching. One of the classes that I taught frequently was situational awareness, active shooter classes. We watch the news, we know that this is still an issue. So yeah, situational awareness, it's important. I walked into a crowded thrift store the other day, and it's still the summer of 23 at the time of filming this, and observed an individual by himself wearing a military-style trench coat. Now this is probably the atypical observation of a situational awareness situation when you see a lone wolf in a trench coat in a crowded place, or harshly spoken, a target-rich environment. Because we were so far into the store by the time I saw this individual, it made avoiding him very difficult. So I chose to observe and get a closer look and see if there was something that needed to be addressed here. What I found was not somebody who meant harm to anybody, but a young man who turned out to be a pretty awesome guy. He was trying on a military-style trench coat that was for sale in the thrift store, and striking up a conversation with him and his friends that I realized were with him a little bit downrange, I observed these two patches on the jacket. Now right off the bat, I'm a student of history and a keen observer of military affairs, and I recognized that that was a staff sergeant patch, and that's the U.S. Army Third Army patch, otherwise known as Patton's Third Army. To me, that's a pretty famous patch. One of the things I found very interesting by doing just the slightest amount of research is there was a staff sergeant within Patton's Third Army named Lafayette G. Poole. Now a staff sergeant's got a tough job. The span of control can be a half a dozen to a dozen. The sphere of influence can include other squads supervising other sergeants. This is a very hard-working individual in our military forces, and my heart goes out to the three stripers out there. I love each and every one of you. Thank you for your service, whether you're in public safety or if you're in the armed forces. This individual, Lafayette G. Poole, enlisted out of Texas into the ranks and instantly became involved in armor. He was a tanker. And you can see by his ribbons, his fruit salad, that he earned a lot of distinguished ribbons for his service. What I find most fascinating about this man is he drove a Sherman tank in the European Theater of Operations, the ETO, and the Brits lovingly called those a Tommy cooker. The amazing thing about G. Poole is his frontline service lasted from the end of June to the middle of August. That's a pretty short stint if you think about it. He had 3 tanks. All 3 of them shot out from underneath him and his crew, but he kept most of his crew alive the whole time. The tanks bore the nickname In the Mood. Meant he was spoiling for a fight, wanted to engage the enemy at close quarters, and engage the enemy he did. He was credited, him and his crew, as having 12 confirmed tank kills. Now this is against a far superior Panzer or Tiger tank. 12 tank kills, 258 total armored vehicle and SPG, self-propelled gun kills, over 1,000 enemy dead, with 250 taken prisoner of war. Did all this in 81 days. This is a hard-working man. The only thing that stopped him was having that 3rd tank shot out from underneath him and his crew, flipped over, and shrapnel so badly wounded his leg it was amputated a few inches above the knee. I believe he'd have drove that thing, and in Patton's exact words, all the way to Berlin and personally shoot that paper-hanging son of a bitch Hitler. So G. Poole, amazing man. His nickname was War Daddy. He lived to the ripe old age teaching automotive mechanics, and was even a pastor back in his hometown in Texas for a while. Raised several kids, one of which was lost to the special forces in Vietnam. I had a helicopter shot down over Cambodia, best I can tell. So they drove in the mood through the European theater of operations, and you can see the first tank was shot out underneath him pretty early on, and he managed to get most of his crew out of there and avoid capture. Second tank was in dire straits, but he was saved by ground support from a P-38 Lightning. Anyone who's watched this channel and snuck a peek at my screensaver on my computer knows I'm a big fan of that bird. The fork-tailed devil is what the Germans referred to it. So the interesting thing is, back to George Patton. This was George Patton's Third Army. Georgie had a long and storied career. Everybody knows who he is. Through Africa, had some controversial happenings in World War II regarding the treatment of soldiers. George Patton said a lot of stuff that didn't hold up well to today's filter. But I would remind you to never prescribe malice to that which is better explained by ignorance. Patton had a heart for anyone who was a fighting man and had a servant's heart. He didn't care where you were from. Matter of fact, he employed some of the first groups of African tankers in the regular army. And it went very well, by the way. So to this day, they still refer to the Third Army, I think it's now Central Army, as Patton's. If you're in the armed forces and I'm not describing the Third Army, Central Army, the Tank Corps, the Spearhead to your satisfaction, forgive me. These are general descriptions and military nomenclature and division, regiment, squad, platoon, you name it. It's very difficult, and there's sometimes a lot of different ways to look at it. I mean, no disrespect. Interesting thing about Patton and his drive into Berlin is soon after the war was over, Patton became extremely controversial and unpleasant. He had quite a disdain for politicians, and he was quoted many times as saying that we defeated the wrong enemy. Patton was well aware of the Soviet issue, and he foreshadowed the Cold War and was convinced that we should not have stopped in Berlin, but should have drove all the way to Moscow before we stopped hostilities in the European theater. Interestingly enough, Patton was involved in an automobile accident. If you want a good conspiracy theory, you do the research and form your own conclusions. I'm making none here. It was reported in the papers that Patton was involved in a serious head-on collision. You can see by the damage to the car here that it wouldn't qualify as serious, but he was reported as striking his head on the glass partition in the limousine and feeling some symptoms of paralysis along with significant bleeding. Head wounds bleed bad. Patton laid in bed and soon succumbed to his injuries, is the official record. There are many who think otherwise. Like I said, form your own opinions. Looking at the patches on this jacket and seeing this staff sergeant in this army, it had a lot of meaning to me. And I talked with the young men as they were gathered around, and I shared some of this just off the top of my head. Obviously, since then, I've done some more research. This trench coat's interesting find. They ended up buying the trench coat and keeping it. Good on him. You can see by the tag here that this was genuine military issue, and there were even more patents awarded, not the general, but the U.S. Patent Office patents, based on the liner of the jacket. I put this jacket mid-50s, late 50s, early 60s, which I found very interesting because there's another very notable sergeant in the Third Army. Elvis Presley rose to the rank of sergeant in the Third Army, and he was with armor. While he didn't see frontline combat, I think it's interestingly enough. The Tommy Cooker. Please, stay with us for another moment while we talk about situational awareness. Now, this is a highly abbreviated course. Take nothing I say here as instruction for you to make decisions out in the public in areas where there could be potential issues that you might have to decide how you would like to react to. Many of you work for large employers that offer this type of training, whether it's an educational institute, a public office, or a large corporation. There's a lot of good training out here, but ultimately you have to make decisions in your own welfare and act accordingly. This is not instruction. That being said, in situational awareness, there's several basic elements that are available to the public that you can look over and read about. The first one are the color codes, and this is about how you go through life. Now, if you're code white, and these codes mean nothing, by the way, other than just trying to make a graphic representation, so don't read too far into them. If you're code white, you're that person that you have seen crossing the road on your cell phone, or driving on your cell phone, or putting on makeup, or walking through a situation completely unaware of what's going on with you. Code yellow, you're prepared, but you're alert, you're relaxed. That's good situational awareness. You're out at a restaurant, a ball game, a mall, you're in a public building where there's a lot of people. Code yellow means your phone's down, you're aware of what's going on around you, and you're seeing things. Code yellow was what I walked into the store. And then I observed something that heightened my awareness to orange. And that's a specific alert. Code orange was I was ready to take action. Now, the first action I will always take, almost guaranteed, is to avoid, to leave, to not engage, to get out of the area if I think there's a potential issue. I've done it many times. I'll do it many more times. Most times people that I was with didn't even know. Now, my family, we've all coached on this and we've talked about what we'll do. But code orange, prepared to take action. Code red, that red color, action mode, totally committed to the emergency at hand. If I can avoid, I'm going to avoid. If I can deny, close a door, secure an area, I'm going to do that. Ultimately, if I have to, I may choose to defend myself, the people I'm with. That's a choice I may have to make. Again, this is not instruction. And then you go to code black. That's total system overload. That is a complete breakdown of physical and mental performance. We've all been in situations where the hands will start shaking a little bit, heart rate comes up, you start sweating, close call in traffic, a close call with a loose dog that you thought was dangerous, something like that. We've all been in those positions where we went from code white to code black, system overload, and we're not prepared to function. I have a video earlier in my channel called Preparing Your OODA Loop. It talks about wargaming those and playing those scenarios over your head. So that loop of observe, detect, decide, and act, OODA loop, gets tighter and tighter so that you avoid going into that breakdown of your physical and mental performance, and you know what you're going to do in those situations. That's what situational awareness training is all about. Those are some of the levels. Again, don't walk through life code white. Then what I saw ticked off some of these boxes. I saw an individual by themselves, oversized, loose-fitting clothing, not appropriate for the event or the weather. Wears a trench coat in the summertime. Hands were in the pockets. I didn't mention that earlier. And it was such a bulky piece of clothing I couldn't see, but they were so far in that it easily could have been supporting something large underneath that jacket. And now, when I realize this was an individual trying on a piece of clothing, it makes perfect sense. But initially, these were some of the boxes that I saw. By engaging with these guys directly, where I could observe and determine immediately that they were actually pretty cool dudes and not a threat to anybody, we had a great discussion. And at the time, they had no idea that I was looking at them in this lens. So if you want to pause this and read some of these and study some of this, you can maybe benefit from that. This is a copyrighted saying here from Alert. They're out of universities in Texas. Great group of people. They can bring training to your facility. If you reach out to them directly, I highly recommend them. This is where my credentialing for training active shooter and situational awareness came from. Avoid, leave, if you can, just leave. That's always the best thing. Deny, secure a room, secure a door. If you go back and look at the Virginia Tech shooting, you'll see that Jewish professor who survived the Holocaust did a great job of denying access, saved everybody in his classroom. And then if you have to, if you choose to, defend is an option. You're entitled to go home at night. So I'm off my soapbox now, and I'm back to supporting your local artist and the artist in the thumbnail here. One of the interesting things I note is everywhere I go, people commonly compliment me on this ring and this watch. I love this watch. And I love this ring. This ring was made by Noah Pfeiffer. I got it at Garland's Jewelry, and it's a very masculine ring as far as jewelry goes. and I love it dearly because it's very comforting to me. I don't know why, when a piece of jewelry resonates with you, it picks you, maybe you don't pick it. Funny story, I'm on duty one night and it's raining, sleeting, and snowing on us, and I mistakenly had this ring on, and I looked down one day and it was gone. And I was utterly heartsick, thinking I had lost this thing somewhere along a 12-hour shift in the middle of nowhere. But what was funny is the body cameras that we wore had a headband mount, and it was a strong magnet that clipped to the headband and the camera attached to that. Apparently, when I was adjusting my camera, the wet rain, my skin was wet, the ring came off and stuck to the magnet. I must have walked around with that thing stuck to my hat for 6 hours. I didn't realize until I got home and I took my hat off that my ring was there, magnet, the whole time because of the steel. So Noah Pfeiffer, if you're watching this, thank you, man. You're a great jewelry designer, and I appreciate this ring. This watch is I'll say retro, dated, not quite antique yet, Tissot. Now, if you've ever had a Swatch or an Omega, you've worn a Tissot. They've been around since 1853. This is a Swiss watch. It's a fantastic watch. I love the stainless steel band, the bright, simple to read numbers, the clean face, the glow in the dark hands with the date. I have worn this watch through 14 years of public service, and it's never failed me, only having a battery replaced once. I got the battery done from Jeff Carl Jewelers in northern Arizona, Flagstaff, Arizona. If you're in the area, you live there, or you're traveling and you need jewelry or watch repair done, please support Jeff Carl. Anybody guess the age of this watch? They give you a bonus prize in the comments down below. You can see here that it's available on Amazon for about $750, but this is obviously a much newer version because it doesn't have the numbers, and it's referred to as a Powermatic 80 Silicon. Mine is much older. Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, there's amazing stories all around us. You just got to pay attention and find them. And to my buddies I made at the thrift store, thank you so much for talking to me. That was great to get to meet you guys. Yeti at large.